who have passed on. Farewell. O te rā, ka piti hono tātai hono, tātou kia tātou, rātou kia rātou. We acknowledge those who have passed on, but we also acknowledge those that are living who have joined us here this evening. I have a few preliminary health and safety messages. If you're wondering where the bathrooms are, they are 50 meters that way. I went and stepped it out, and I was trying to do little steps. So it's probably about 55 actually, 55 steps, turn left and go right to the end. You think you're going out the window, turn left. So if you've getting that feeling that you might need to go, you should go. Cool. In the case of an emergency, we will be directed, but if we're not directed, we're going to go outside the doors here, turn left, and we're going to go down the stairs. We're not going to use the lifts. We're not going to use the lifts. We're going to go down the stairs and just meet outside on the road there. The security should direct us to where we need to go, but that's the basic. Left, straight out. Cool. The food and drinks, I think, are finished, especially the vol buns, and I hope you've enjoyed those refreshments. Just like to thank our sponsors for this evening, Tauranga City Council, Western Bay of Plenty District Council, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Priority 1, and to FutureFit. And I think we have some of the representatives, our worship, the Mayor from Western Bay. I just see my eyes are not quite as good. Where are you, John? He's here. Oh, it's right here. This is a test on my part. I should have worn my glasses. Good to see you, worship. And we have Kat McMillan from the Regional Council. There she is. You're getting pointed out. Nice to see you. Thank you for attending this evening. Turning to the kaupapa this evening, this is celebrating local heroes in climate action their organisation, business, or themselves are taking in their respective areas. We want the audience to walk away feeling hopeful about the future and motivated to take climate action in their own life. And we've got 4 wonderful wahine who have come along. Now, we've got a speaker at the end, I think he was 17 years old. Okay. Carla is a little bit nervous, but I said, you've got 3 experienced speakers before you. By the time we get to you, you'll be just like, oh yeah, I've got this. So just to introduce them very quickly, and I'm going to introduce them individually as well. We've got Laura, Rina, Stacey, Karlia at the end. My name. My name's Antione Coffin. This evening's not about me. I'm going to be your wonderful host to make sure that you're all safe and sound for the duration of this kōrero. That was all I had to do, Millie? Fantastic. Got thumbs up. Awesome. I'd like to introduce Laura Robichaux. She's a coastal engineer and climate change adaptation specialist, and she's working at Becca. And she has a keen interest in all things climate and has a PhD in environmental science from the University of Auckland. She's going to be presenting on climate change adaptation planning processes, discussing the roles of community science engineers and governments in climate adaptation, sharing success stories and practical tips for climate adaptation planning in the region. Now, I know you've got a connection to Virginia, isn't it? Sure. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I wonder if she's going to do a song for us. I'm not putting you on the spot. We'll do the presentation and then we'll see if it's a song moment. Okay. Would you like to come up?
Kia ora. Kia ora, everyone. Ko Laura Robichaux tōku ingoa. I have a mihi, but I won't do it because I won't burden you with my poor pronunciation, but I am working on it. I'm learning. Kia ora. So I am really grateful to be asked to be here today. I'm really thankful for Bay of Plenty Regional for hosting us, as well as EnviroHub. Just a bit about me, and then I'll transition to talking about my organization because that's much easier to do, I think. I grew up outside of New Orleans in South Louisiana. We get hit by some pretty big floods there every once in a while, with storm surges hitting, well over 10 meters. So living with natural hazards and climate-driven hazards has very much so been a part of my life as long as I can remember. I used to turn up to the community meetings and public meetings and, listen to my parents talk around the table about how there was all of these studies happening and all of these plans and way less action. And then when action was taken, it always somehow felt like it wasn't enough. We work together we as in our communities, the state government, the federal government, work together to build coastal defenses and river defenses to keep out flooding. But as we were doing that, and as we were changing the natural system, it meant that the natural system could no longer absorb these shocks. So that whenever hurricanes came through, the marsh was damaged or the wetlands was damaged, and the storms were way worse. And while we might be protected from maybe the surge, we're not protected from the wind, and then what happens? So all of that to say, natural hazards, climate hazards certainly impact the way I grew up, the way I live my life. And that's kind of why I do what I do. I come from a coastal engineering and water engineering background, and really think that to have successful climate change adaptation, we need to work with Indigenous peoples and others in the community as partners, as collaborators to work through how we can make a path forward. Because there isn't one right answer, and there maybe isn't a right answer at all. But we can take action, we can take steps forward, and we can start to make a safer, more sustainable place. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll talk about my role in my organization and all of the cool people that I work with and the cool things that we're doing. So this graphic is maybe one of James Hughes's, he's in the audience. It's from the National Climate Change Risk Assessment, not a Becca product, but very much so kind of a guiding piece of work for Aotearoa New Zealand that sets out how we can start to examine these hazards, not just how they affect physical infrastructure, but how they affect natural environments, governance systems with the election coming up, how they affect our economies, and how they affect our people socially. And so there will be lots of changes over time. And so in order to meet these changes, we kind of have two sides of the climate action coin, if we can call it that, where there's mitigation, which is reducing impacts. So reducing how we live, or changing how we live in order to reduce the likelihood of climate change occurring, or to reduce the rate of climate change. And then adaptation is the other side of the coin, where we change how we live, or how we design things, or where we live in order to reduce the impacts on our lives. Now, these two can sometimes be a little opposed, because if you're doing lots of adaptation works, maybe you're building a lot of things, or you're changing a lot of buildings, which takes a whole lot of effort and a lot of emissions, which maybe it's not so great from a mitigation standpoint. And we have been working at Becca to try and figure out the balance of these two. And one of the things that we've been doing is we've been trying to work with local and regional governments to help them make better decisions, or better climate-informed decisions. I see a few nods in the back. I think you guys know where I'm going. So we've been working with Bay of Plenty Regional Council and Whakatane District Council to co-design this climate impact assessment tool, and hopefully roll it out to other local and regional governments that helps them to compare different projects, different options, to try and make better informed decisions from both a mitigation side. So if we build this library here, are people going to have to drive farther, and it's going to result in more emissions? To an adaptation side, oh, if we build this library here, is it in a floodplain? So there are lots of small decisions, everyday decisions that local governments, regional governments can make that can have impacts on the mitigation side and the adaptation side. And there's so much really great action happening in this nexus in the middle between adaptation and mitigation. We're looking at daylighting streams. So that basically means to deal with water, we have put in pipes to get rid of it or to make it disappear. Well, water doesn't just disappear. And so daylighting streams is essentially removing those pipe networks and restoring historic streams or historic overland flow paths. And these streams can hold more water than a pipe can. Who would know? And so that can have these adaptation benefits, but still can also restore ecosystems and store carbon and provide these really, really nice mitigation benefits as well. And I think, you know, reflecting on how we've done things at home in South Louisiana, I think some of that thinking was missing. And they are moving in that direction now, where instead of trying to add more structures to manage the Mississippi River, they are creating diversions which allow sediment and floodwaters to pour out and build new land, which is a really great thing. Not dissimilar from the Kaituna work that was done here in the Bay of Plenty, where the Kaituna was quite restricted and the estuary has been restored for environmental reasons and social reasons to really deliver some really great outcomes. So moral of the story, really great things happening from both the mitigation side and the adaptation side. Also here in the Bay of Plenty, there is work that TCC is doing with the MOUNT program that includes some flood work, flood management work. TCC and Bay of Plenty Regional and Western Bay do a really great job communicating science and communicating hazards. And I think before we can move forward, everyone has to have a really uniform understanding of the big picture. And so the work that they've been doing is really useful to get everyone on the same page and kind of take us along on the journey. But climate change is only one part of the problem, not to throw another spanner in the works. But we all know that there are things happening with pollution and waste, and there is biodiversity loss. And so it really requires a paradigm shift to try and combat this triple planetary crisis. And while we can talk about this crisis, and it's not so much a story of hope, I think the work that's being done on the circular economy front and on the wider climate-related disclosures and nature-related disclosures is certainly a source of hope. What a circular economy is basically anything that we take out, we have to put back in, and it takes reuse and recycle to a whole new level. So what that might look like, to use an example with roads, your asphalt, whenever you are paving roads, gets munched up by the machine and relayed out whenever you're repaving the road. So it's a circular kind of process. There are all sorts of other circular kind of processes that you can start to do. There are companies here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and working on projects in the Bay of Plenty that are starting to mark every single nut, bolt, and screw with unique IDs. That way, at the end of the project's life, they can come back and collect them, use that metal, remake it, know exactly how it was treated, and then redeploy it whenever things are finished. So there's all of this really interesting work that's being done from a material side, from a science side, from an engineering side to create this circular economy that reinforces all of these pillars of sustainability. And so I wasn't quite sure how the session would run, so I had popped in some questions, and we won't necessarily do these, but I think one of the only ways that we can succeed is by working together. It takes all of the voices in the room, and sometimes it requires us getting in a different waka and helping row and push things along. And the more that we work together, the more we exchange ideas, the more that we can integrate perspectives, design out waste and pollution, and take these holistic approaches to climate change action, the more we're going to be successful. I moved over to do my PhD ages ago, and the PhD was focused on the implementation gap from reflecting on those chats that my parents would have around the table at dinner. And one of the big things that was a marker of success for climate action projects was that you had a diverse team around you, where if I am working as an engineer and I run up against some sort of hurdle, who can I pass the ball to on my team that maybe has a different way to frame the solution, to frame the problem, to get some funding, to get a consent that can take the project forward when I get held up. If you have a diverse team, you're going to go much farther than if you're sitting working in silos. And so, in summary, I think, I am way over time, I'm sorry. In summary, I really love what I do. And I really love my coworkers and who I get to do it with. We work together every day to whakapai ake, to make every day better. Small steps, sometimes really big steps, sometimes hard days. But we were able to bring together lots of different disciplines, and I'm able to learn from people like Meg and Alyssa every day in order to make some really positive change happen. Kia ora.
Hey, thank you, Laura. You were only 3 minutes over. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's impressive. Awesome. It's not a competition. Our next speaker is Rina Te Rehina Walker, who works at Ngapeke Permaculture. Rina is a Tauranga native with a background in Māori education, iwi and whānau water development, and has worked as permaculture design consultant for the past 12 years. She's going to be presenting on sustainable farming practices and regenerative agriculture in the Bay of Plenty. She'll be discussing the role of permaculture in mitigating climate change locally and sharing success stories and practical tips for implementing permaculture techniques in the region. So I'm really looking forward to this because I've got a little permaculture project coming up. So I'm going to be taking mental notes. And I know there was a couple of people in the audience who were like, oh yeah. Hopefully we'll get some free tips. So welcome, Rehina. Nā mai harama. And then we have the blank screen. Let's try again. There we go. Good.
Oh, yeah, push.
Is there a presentation or not? Do you want to go to the next one?
Oh, yeah.
Right. There it is. Oh my goodness. Skip verification.
Right.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. Oh, there's the sound.
As a gardener, as a coacher,
here comes the techie.
as a person,
We've made a mistake.
revitalising the whenua to sustain.
A few moments later,
I can play it off that one, but for some reason it's not picking it up here.
That's okay. That's okay.
okay.
We'll skip.
By using
We'll skip. Well, maybe we'll just.
the same methods our tupuna used. It's all regenerative mahi. Returning the whenua.
Sorry, everybody. Okay. Ko maua te maunga, ko Tauranga te moana, ko rangatawa te tahuna, ko waitao te awa, ko pukairo te tahi o nā maunga, ko tau whakatiki, tātou ko tamapahore, ko te whetu o te rangi ngā marae. Nō reira he pāpaka o rangatawa ahau. E mihi ana ki a koutou. Oh, sorry. So, so I just gave you my whakapapa introduction, or my pepeha. I am a native to Tauranga, and my people have been here for hundreds of years. And I was just describing, giving you my affiliations, which is to Ngai Te Rangi Ngāti Rangi Nui Ngāti Pukenga. And I was born and raised on the around the Waitau River in Welcome Bay. And so I just referred to myself as being one of the crabs of Rangatawa Bay. Ngā mihi atu ki a koutou. Okay, so that little video thing was just to give you a little bit of a taste. I think the pictures say 1,000 words, so lots of pictures in the presentation, and I'll talk to them as we go. So just to describe where we are, we're on the Ngapeke 7 land block, which is on Kaiwha Road out in Welcome Bay. There's 270 shareholders in that block who all descend to Ngāti Pukenga. In other words, it's 42 acres, or it's 16 hectares. Its history from the 60s is that it was dairy farming. My uncle had 50-odd milking cows there back in the 60s. Then he left and moved elsewhere. And then the property was leased out in the 80s for crop, mainly maize. So maize right up until 2021. And the picture here, all that brown, all that fawny coloured area is where all the maize was. So back in 2019, we, the Land Trust run, they're called the Ngapeke 7 Trust. They administered the block and they had a dream. They didn't want to put kiwi fruit on there, not like everybody else. They wanted to do something different. So they approached me a number of years ago now, but I was working in Wellington at the time. So long story short, 2019, I said to them, yes, okay, let's go and do this. Let's do, they wanted a food forest on there, but my vision was much bigger, taking into account the climate challenges that we're facing. And, you know, we've been in the area a long time. It's changed so much to what it used to be. And we know that it's, you know, we've lost a lot of our native species and so on that used to grow in the area. We used a lot of those. Rauwhē, for example, was something that used to line the kumara pits. And they would line it like this between the kumara, and they dug pits into the ground. And that's how it was done. That's how my grandmother did it. And now we don't see it anymore. Good news though. So 2019, we decided to put the first plants in. We had to progressively wait for the maize contractor to leave the property, because the trust was still making a small income from that contractor. So it took about 3 years for the contractor to finally leave all the property. So there was a progressive change going on through the property. So what you're looking at here now, swales is a real feature of permaculture design. And in here you can see the swales themselves. Swales are measured out on contour to catch and hold water and slow water down in the landscape. So there's 6 swales throughout this top part of the property, and they're also access ways. So they're not just catching water, but we can get our vehicles and so on down into the property to wherever we need to go. So these maize, how do I use, well, anyway, the maize, these blocks here on this first well, or on the one side of the first well, was a carbon sequestration research project with Waikato University with Terry Ison. So, you know, we're very keen. Yeah, you mentioned that, you know, everybody has a part to play and we all have to be part of this to, you know, to take this challenge head on. So many tools in the kete, so to speak, many mātauranga in the kete as well, or knowledge in the kete, different expertise in the kete in order to, you know, mitigate. So, yeah, by the way, we use mātauranga Māori is a big feature in what we do. So it's our cultural knowledge that we use as well. Permaculture is a very useful tool, but the whāriki, or the base of the whole project, is based on what we know culturally. So so what we're practicing is kaitiakitanga. When you practice kaitiakitanga, then you're doing something half right. So to help with climate, with the whole environmental degradation thing and correcting that. And when you're doing that, then you're helping climate too. So we have a lot of people who come on board. We've got a small team, but the whole community is behind this project and there's so many people come in and participate. We're very open. Our gate is always open for people to come in. And in return, we give them little bits of what we know, and in exchange, they help us with planting, potting, whatever it is we happen to be doing at the time. Lots of visiting groups come in. And this is just a shot of our nursery, and our nursery magician is here in the audience. That's Chrissy over there. Put your hand up, Chrissy. And she's a Tauranga specialist, Tauranga species specialist. If you don't know what a Tauranga species is, it's anything native. That's Chrissy. So, okay, next one. Here's my time going. So the block is made up of pasture and there's a wetland as well. It's probably a third of the property, makes up about a third of the property, and it borders the Waitau River. So we've been in there planting natives along the riverbank. For now, there's loads of weed species in the block, but we make use of that. It either becomes chip, mulch, compost, or even manure. You know, we give it to the goats and then they turn it, you know, the horses, and they turn it into manure. So nothing actually leaves the property. We use it all. So we make use of what's there. You turn the problem into a solution, and you use that to do what you need to do. So there was lots of weeds down here. We're very precise about the way that we plant because we're 100%, 120%, no chemicals, no herbicides, no pesticides. And that brings another kind of a challenge, but it seems to be working for us, hey, Chrissy. It's about proper planning. So when you plan to replant or regenerate an area, you have to have a precise plan. And so we do that. It starts in the nursery because we need the plants, and then it's the timing of everything. Timing is everything when we're working with our natives. So we don't have a huge, problem there. And we decide what the plan is and we stick with it. So we've been very successful and very proud that we're not using any chemicals whatsoever, not even the paste to get rid of any weed trees. We use manual labor or machinery. So, Next one. So Te Kapua is a property just around the corner from us. It's a Ngāti Pukinga whenua, and it's just been a green kiwi, no, not green, gold, kiwi gold organic orchard. So it belongs to the iwi, and these are some of our iwi members. We have a festival gathering every couple of years, and we had one this year. They came up to Ngapeke Permaculture, and then they went on to Te Kapua. So we're educating our people as we go along. And the tribe is 120%, supportive of these initiatives. Because on the other hand, our people are still fishing and whatnot in the rivers, in the bay, out in the mona. So we don't want to do anything that's going to affect that. We don't want to participate in that. So we're very careful about anything we put on the land. So this is the wetland. So back in the day, they took the wetland out, or tried to, for pasture, and they've been using it to grow maize. Never ever did really good at all, because it wants to be a wetland. Doesn't want to be a cornfield, So, but this is what happened in 2022. Hang on, I'm not sure if I'm on the right side. I've forgotten now. But anyway, the next one will show. So we had 8 floods in 2022 down in the wetland. Nothing got dry for that whole year, right into probably the beginning of 2023. Or even now, you can see that there's still some really wet places down there. I couldn't believe it. These are the things that we know when there's something going on, when it's not right. Something's changed drastically for these kind of events to happen. So throughout the whole of 2022, this was happening. 8 times it happened. So we're very aware that we have to do our bit to help mitigate all this flooding. Oh, there's my timer gone off. Hang on. You can see there that there's a fence across there. It goes across that flooding plain. The fence is about this height. So, and this would have been maybe a week after, or a few days after that particular flood. So, right. So what are we doing in our community? Well, we do an awful lot with our community. We actually, we really rely on our community. We can't do all this work. Me, Chrisioli, we can't do it on our own. We need our community. So we have, as I was saying before, we invite them in. So we have a Hapuri Thursday, which is an open day. People come in on a Thursday for a couple of hours. We sit and we always have a kai. We don't let our manaakitanga or it's part of our culture to do that. So we always have a kai at the end of the working day. And many, I don't even know how many people. I don't know. There's a few of them in the room. So, and then workshop Thursday. So one thing about me is that, we're not trying to make money out of climate change. We have to do things, we have to, be part of the solution. So we're not trying to make a profit. I don't get that actually. That people are trying to make a profit out of climate change. We give our education away, and we do it on a Thursday. It's called Workshop Thursday. Free workshops to our community. Anybody can come along. We want everybody to be involved in this solution, in the solutions. So we don't ask them to pay for it. Another thing we're doing with Matua Rei Totorewa is, as a COVID as I can't leave without talking about his project first. So, so he is building garden beds in the community. Lots of people need them. Lots of people want them. There's a huge increase in interest in having gardens in people's backyards. So he's been doing this for 2 years. The first 25 beds were funded. The rest not funded. But we have some very kind and giving people in our community who gave compost, who gave timber, who gave tools, who gave trailers, and who, you know, and all that. And Ray does it all for nothing. But we can't continue to do that. And we are looking for some funding for that now because there's such a need there. And we have to keep doing this. And we see it as being part of the solution. So and people feel good about having a participation. Oh, these are some of the people that got the garden beds. We're not just doing workshops and Kapuri Thursdays at Ngapeke alone. We'll go out into the community too. If people need our help, we'll go. Alternative education. So we're big on growing people as well, right? So we have a few youth that come through the property. Ollie, he's on the horse there. This is Ollie here. He works with youth regularly. So there's a lot of the youth that are coming in. It's too much. Oh, priority one. I have to mention that because they're their responses. So. No, but so priority one, we've been sitting at the table with them for about a year or so, and they really want to tautoko what we're doing. Now we need, so this is our whakaaro. The more people you have in the environment and on the rivers and on the mona, the more eyes on things to take note of what's happening in the, used to happen all the time because we lived on the mona and we lived in the environment. We don't do that now. We live in supermarkets. So this is a way to encourage our people to get back into those spaces. Priority one, with their help. We ran this building a kayak workshop. That kayak is going to be used on the river to get our people out and be scouts, if you like, or just be part of the environment. So Nuku Tai Tere is the name of our waka, and that was priority one. He sponsored that, so that's cool. Kakariki market. We don't do them very often now. It's quite a big job to do that. But if there's any volunteers who want to come and run that for us, yay, they might have my. We went to Hawaii because they're our whanaunga, and we're really interested in the impact of climate change with them too. So we spent 3 weeks with them working in the lo'i and in the ahupua, is their land management systems, and we call it taro, they call it kalo. So this photo, the whānau in Hawaii, and our team. I've already mentioned them, haven't I? But there's a few volunteers in here too. So, big shout out to you fellas. You can't do this job without you. You know that. Lots of people. People everywhere. Yeah, thank you. And then if you want to find out and follow what we do, because we're posting all the time, you can find us. Go to Google. We're there.
Kia ora, Rina. I think that was the marketing department of Ngapeke Permaculture. So there was an invitation to come out on Thursdays, I think 10 o'clock is when 10 to 1 is when they were running the workshops. And there's a wonderful reciprocity. Come and help and you'll learn something and there'll be a bit of a kai at the end of it. That's always a veggies to take home. So there's an open invitation. There was also there was a question in there. Who would like to be a cornfield? No takers? Okay, I think cornfields are over. It was wonderful, and the pictures speak a million words. So it was wonderful having some pictures of people being out in the environment. Thank you very much for your presentation. Our next speaker is Stacey Linton. Stacey is working for the Department of Conservation now, but most recently had a role with Tourism Bay of Plenty. So much of the presentation is regarding some of that work. And so Stacey was head of strategy and insights at Tourism Bay of Plenty, a role that was also responsible for leading the organisation's sustainability and regenerative tourism initiatives. And now Stacey been about 4 weeks or so with the Department of Conservation in a new role as the Senior Insight Advisor. So Stacey is passionate about the health of our natural environment and how tourism can be a vehicle to drive positive outcomes for people in place. She's going to be presenting on sustainable tourism initiatives in the Bay of Plenty and the impact on climate change and highlighting local ecotourism efforts and responsible travel practices, exploring for the tourism industry in the region to contribute to climate change. No mai hara mai.
Kia ora tātou. E mihi ana ki a koe, Antione. Thank you for the intro. E ngā mihi nui ki a koutou I tēnei wā. Anei tōku pepeha, ko tō māpau tōku maunga, ko te hoere tōku awa, ko matua hautere tōku tangata, ko te hoere tōku waka, ko ngati kuia tōku iwi. No whakatua hau, engari no tauranga moana I. Noho ana e nai nei. Stacey Linton tōku ingoa, no reira tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. As Antione said, yes, I do currently work for Department of Conservation, but when this invitation came out to speak tonight, I was with Tourism Bay of Plenty, and so I kind of, have just kind of taken a long tail to move out of T-Buff, but I'm still kind of connected to them, but yeah, really excited to be here and speak on behalf. So I am here to talk primarily about sustainable tourism in the Bay of Plenty and the initiatives that are being undertaken to address climate change. Tourism has traditionally been somewhat of an extractive industry, right? It's provided economic benefit, but it does obviously have the potential to be detrimental on local communities and the environment with issues that you've probably heard of, like overcrowding, high carbon emissions, rubbish, waste, so on and so forth. But at Tourism Bay of Plenty, which is the regional tourism organisation for this rohe, our goal, I'm just going to talk as if I'm still there, okay, it's easier. Our goal is to aim for a regenerative tourism system, which at its simplest is about leaving the people and our place, our communities better than we found them. So it's about helping to create a visitor industry that's better for everyone. It's not a new concept. It's really about understanding that the health of the people in this place are intertwined and they're reliant on each other. Essentially, it's Te Ao Māori in practice. There's similar ethos throughout other Indigenous communities around the world as well. All we're doing is pulling it really into modern day tourism. So for those of you who aren't familiar with some of us have introduced ourselves using our pepeha. In Te Ao Māori, it's a way of introducing yourself by sharing your connections with the places and the people that are important to you. So I shared with you where I'm from. I shared my maunga and the river in that place, my iwi, my people, my ancestors. And that concept of connectedness of the people in the natural environment, it's also encapsulated in the whakatauki, toi tū te marae a tāne māhuta, toi tū te marae a tangaroa, toi tū te tangata. If the land is well and the sea is well, the people will thrive. Excuse me, I have to have notes because I don't have a great memory. But tautoko to my fellow speakers who could wing it, really well done. So look, the tourism sector's been on a bit of a journey for a number of years to become more sustainable and to push towards this regenerative way of thinking. I probably don't need to tell this room how important that is. It is the right thing to do, and it is necessary given the current situation that the world is in today. Added to this, the local tourism industry is tied to the natural environment, right? The ocean, the beaches, the horticultural provenance, that's all really makes our destination what it is. It makes people want to come here. So there are many reasons for us to be moving in this direction. And the good news is that it's not just Tourism Bay of Plenty. This is actually happening nationally and it's happening globally as well. So the whole industry is moving in this direction. Wanted to also mention that consumer values are changing as well around the world. People are more conscious of climate change. They're thinking about what their actions, the impact of their actions. Locals and visitors alike are wanting to support businesses and destinations that leave a light footprint or that better yet give back to the places they're in. I'm a stats nerd, so I had to put one in here. So according to Expedia, 90% of consumers look for sustainable options when travelling. And I've just been reading a report today on the Milford Sounds project that really looked at, it was heartening to see how many people are really looking for sustainable options when they're travelling and want to kind of give back to those businesses that are doing good things for the environment in those places. So obviously it's it's an absolute imperative that we act to mitigate the effects of climate change for the sake of ourselves and for the generations that come after us. But there's also an economic motivation in the short term as well. I do want to point out, the big elephant in the room, that there's an obvious tension between an industry that's reliant on high carbon travel and sustainability. Right? I'm not ignoring that. It's a massive point of discussion. We're not going to solve it tonight. I will say that organisations like Tourism Bay of Plenty and many others locally, nationally, globally are working towards how you can make those travel options low carbon as well. But, you know, Tourism Bay of Plenty, it doesn't have the ability to control all of that. It just has to look at what it can control. So our vision, our strategy is called Te Hā Tāpoi, or the love of tourism. It aims to ensure that the experience offered here in the Coastal Bay of Plenty is deeply entrenched in our cultural heritage, and it helps the environment to flourish, while also supporting the economic benefits and making sure that those benefits go out to the wider community, aren't just concentrated in the city. So what we do is we encourage, we support, we advocate for sustainable and regenerative tourism experiences. So what we can do is that we can support our tourism industry to embed sustainability practices. We can market, and we do market the destination to people who are going to come here and really love and respect this place and share similar passions with the people who live here and who are going to treat it with respect. So I've got a few cool examples to share with you about what's happening locally. So deep in the heart of the Bay of Plenty is a family-owned enterprise called Kohutapu Lodge and Tribal Tours. It's run by Nadine Toitoi and her whānau. They welcome visitors to their place in Murupara, and they offer an experience where visitors will come in and spend the night. They'll work with the family to kind of prepare and cook a hangi. They'll share that around, you know, outside and share some stories and who they are and things. They can go on a guided walk where they hear stories about the connection, the local iwi's connection to the whenua, and they teach the visitors about local plants and the rungua as they go through the ngāhere as well. The part of this, however, that I like the best is that the next day, the host family take the visitors into the local primary school and they take the leftovers from the hangi in there. And it's not just about sharing kai with the kids. It's actually about engaging the visitors with that local community and showing them how they live. And then the kids who maybe haven't left Murupara or haven't left the Bay of Plenty get to meet all these people from around the world and just broaden their horizons through that enterprise. One of the other cool examples is Omatarawa Eco Tours. So about 10 years ago, this crew started the Kiwi project to obviously protect and kind of enhance the number of Kiwi in that area. But they've just last year, I think, just opened that space up to visitors. So they offer guided stories and they share kind of things about the forest. They teach about flora and fauna and what their importance is to the ecosystem and to the Māori way of living. Visitors can plant a native tree. They can learn about the Kiwi Recovery Program, and they're invited to leave a lasting value by sponsoring a Kiwi. And so that creates that direct loop from tourism back into the environment. Probably should also mention what TBOP's doing. So the Green Room, or Te Ruma Kākariki, is a program to encourage visitor sector organisations in Te Moana Nui a Toi, or the Coastal Bay of Plenty, to work towards a zero carbon and regenerative future. When we started thinking, what can TBOP do in this space, we knew that it had to be practical and it had to be tailored to each individual organisation. While regenerative tourism is the long-term goal, given the challenges the tourism industry has been facing over the past few years, this program does have more of a sustainability aim at this point. It has a core environmental focus, but it is holistic. It covers financial sustainability and resilience, the visitor experience, and it has a community good focus as well. Really want to acknowledge Bay of Plenty Regional Council Toi Moana at this point, as they are providing funding to enable this project and allow it to be free for 100 visitor sector organisations across the Coastal Bay of Plenty by June next year. Also to acknowledge EnviroHub, who are helping us deliver this program locally with Tourism Industry Aotearoa. So far, 83 organisations have either completed that program or are currently underway. And that is the range through the tourism sector. So it's activities, it's accommodation, everything in between, cafes, restaurant, event organisers. There's an airline that's gone through it, a bus company. It's pretty awesome. So most of those businesses are now measuring their carbon footprints. Many of them are looking at ways to reduce that. They've got EVs or downgraded, or got smaller cars. They're looking through their supply chain to see how they can get waste out of their system. Cool example is Riverbugs New Zealand, who are donating their end-of-life wetsuits to be made into boxing bags, which is really neat. And Fife Lane, I've just heard, are planning to start a petition to encourage food suppliers to use less packaging. So that's really cool as well. It was first launched in Waihi Beach, and it helped bring several organisations in that community together with the local hapu and a few other entities, and it helped accelerate the launch of Sustainable Waihi Beach. This crew, Sustainable Waihi Beach, are doing awesome things out at the beach. They have already installed a bunch of water filters by the beach, water refill stations, and they want to bring in a lone keep cup system to rid the town of single-use takeaway coffee cups. So support that if you're out there, because that's such a cool initiative. So I want to say, like, you can look at these things that these businesses are doing and think, well, that's not much for one business, but the power is in the collective and what they're all doing together, and that kind of ripple effect that goes on from that. Mount Maunganui Campground Cozy Corner have recently been through the program as well. They were already well on their way in this journey. They've had solar panels since they started. The current owner's dad installed them. I think he built them himself, in fact. They, through this program, however, learned how to calculate their carbon emissions, and they realised that the highest contributor to those emissions was waste. And so they went on an absolute mission over the summer. They got all the signage out there for their guests. They added food bins to the units. They started recycling bottle caps through EnviroHub, and they've looked at their supply chain to cut out waste as well. And I think that is a lesson for us all, that there is always more that we can be doing. So what can you do to support climate action and tourism? Support local, buy local, undertake local experiences, explore your backyard, our backyard. Slow travel is the concept of traveling for a deeper experience. So if you are going overseas, instead of going for a week or two, think about how much longer that you can stay, how much deeper that experience might be if you connect with that local community. Go off the beaten track, explore mindfully, and buy local while you're there. And support entities that are doing good things and experiences that give back to the people in place. With my doc hat on, I will acknowledge biodiversity and the issues there as well, and say, if you're out and about New Zealand, clean your boots before you go to a new place, clean your boat, don't transfer some of those diseases throughout different places. And whilst, I don't have a slide for this, but one last thing I did want to speak about is a really powerful initiative that's just started up. The owner of Kohutapu Lodge, Nadine, who I just mentioned earlier, she started this program called Native Nations. It's a cultural exchange program between Māori rangatahi and Aboriginal or original youth in Australia. So the rangatahi and leaders from New Zealand, they travelled to Australia and engaged with Aboriginal communities and tourism entities. They went on kind of an 8-day tour learning about the people in the place. They went to some really intense experiences where some really bad things had occurred on the land and kind of learnt what those people had been through. Then the experience was reciprocated. So when the Australian contingent was invited to New Zealand and went on a similar tour through the Bay of Plenty to learn about what's happening over here and kind of the history and the culture of the people here as well. It was kind of to understand and celebrate the similarities and differences between each of those Indigenous cultures and explore how that resonated on an individual level for those participating. Also help to connect those rangatahi to their history and their culture and find out, why their stories need to be heard. So I was very fortunate in my Still Connected with T-Bop role to go to the celebration event last week where several of those rangatahi from both Māori and original cultures shared what that initiative meant to them. And it was absolutely one of the most powerful things that I've ever heard. These kids, they spoke of feeling proud of who they are and the culture that they've come from for the first time in their lives. And I think that to me is the power of what tourism can do, but what people who are super passionate about what they're doing can do as well, right? So it's the first program of its kind. There is hope that it will take off among Indigenous communities around the world, and itineraries are being developed so any visitor can go and kind of take that up and explore the same journey that these kids went on as well. Yeah, I guess like Te Ao Māori, other Indigenous cultures around the world live in harmony with the environment. They live with the natural world. It's not about exploiting it. So I think we can take lesson from that and heart from that climate action can come from Indigenous knowledge, and we can all learn from that thinking. So I think that this program has the power to go massive and to teach people a lot of stuff. So I hope that I have shared something about what's happening in the local tourism industry for climate action, about how Te Ao Māori and Indigenous wisdom can help us find a path forward, and about how you can support those initiatives. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Awesome, thanks, Stacey. I was really taken back by those examples of people being local, having deep community experiences, being themselves in their community, and that idea of sharing that with others coming into the community. There was something really special there. Now, Karlia, is any family from Karlia here? Awesome, wonderful. The whānau are here to support you. Awesome. So Karlia Taylor is representing Youth Climate Forum and FutureFit, and a FutureFit ambassador. We're going to hear about FutureFit. Awesome. She's 17 years old, still 17. Wonderful. Lives here in Tauranga, and she's lived here all her life. Last year she was at Ultimoto College, where she was a head student, and she's pursuing a passion for the environment by studying environmental science and geography next year at university. She's a member of Te Toka Whakaia Youth Climate Forum, and of course, as mentioned, has been promoting FutureFit. She's going to be presenting on youth-led climate activism and advocacy in the Bay of Plenty, sharing the perspective of young activists in the region on climate change solutions, discussing the importance of youth engagement in shaping climate policies specific to the Bay of Plenty. She'll also emphasise the importance of sustainability and education for our youth and how this will shape the future. How do I come up here? Now, you're not nervous now, are you?
Okay, so I'm taking more of a structured approach. I'm not quite at the winging it level yet. tēnā koutou katoa. Ko moa tuku maunga, ko wairoa tuku awa, no Tauranga aho. Ko Otamotai College tuku kura, ko Taylor tuku whānau, ko Grant tuku mātua, ko Larice tuku whaia, ko Karlia tuku ingoa. Kia ora everyone, my name is Karlia Taylor and I'm a Year 13 student at Otamotai College. The values of kaitiakitanga and sustainability are incredibly important to me, which is why recently I've been involved in climate activism locally alongside both youth and adults who share these values. In terms of the impacts of climate change, we are constantly exposed to facts and figures. We know global greenhouse gas emissions are causing potentially irreversible impacts on our environment, and we know we have to work fast. We know the facts and we have the evidence, and often this can be overwhelming and cause us to feel anxious about the future of our planet. By connecting with those in our community who also share these values, mindsets shift from problems and anxiety to solutions and ambition. Te Toka Whakaia is the name that was allocated to a group of local youth, including myself, who are a part of a climate forum. The name of this forum is a challenge to us to hold fast like the rock, Te Toka Atirikawa, to our goals and ambitions to protect our land, our heritage, and our environment, so that it is preserved and protected to be seen and experienced by future generations. Whakaia means to appear above the surface, which indicates we must be resilient in our journey, to be leaders, and to rise to combat climate change. Te Toka Whakaia is our name and it represents our purpose. We came together with shared values and aspirations. We wanted to be listened to and we wanted to be a part of Tauranga's first climate action and investment plan because we aspire to make a positive difference in the environment, which starts at a local scale. Earlier in the year, we came together for a wānanga at Huria Marae, where we spent the entire day listening to guest speakers, connecting, and voicing our opinions on the climate action and investment draft plan. We learnt about Indigenous practices and growing produce from Ngapeke Permaculture, which you have just also learnt about, and Charlie Rahidi from Huria Marae shared his experiences with observing firsthand the impacts of climate change on the Pacific Islands and their communities, which recognise climate inequity. Learning about permaculture was very interesting, and it shows that there are existing solutions out there for sustainable agriculture, and highlighted the knowledge of whenua and kaitiaki-tangi in Māori culture, which is something as youth we felt is significant when restoring our relationship with the earth. Charlie's experiences resonated with a number of the rangatahi at the forum, as they are from island nations and are worried about the future of their homes. The dynamic of the group was incredibly supportive, and our genuine and intentional conversations around climate change were positively framed, because we wanted to feel empowered in our ability to catalyze positive change. On this day, we had the opportunity to see some of the quotes from the draft climate action plan and write down our thoughts and feelings about these statements and suggest improvements or additional ideas we wanted to see included in the final plan. From the feedback and conversations, the event organisers took our key points and suggestions back to the advisory group to work on the proposed plan. Being a part of this group on this day seemed like a relatively small event, but the impact was significant. As we all discussed, we had found a new sense of belief and empowerment to make a difference by collaborating and supporting each other. To conclude this wānanga, we sat in a circle and took turns sharing a few words or sentences about what we learnt. I would like to share some of these with you today to help you understand how significant the opportunity to connect and have our voices heard was for us, and show why it is important for youth to continue to be involved in future policy and initiative planning. Today, I learned I am not alone. Today, I learned that I have peers with the same passion and that we have an actual fighting chance in the future. I learned today that climate change relates to everything. We've taken from the earth for so long that it's finally time to give back. Today, I learned about all the cool community initiatives that have been going on. No matter how young we are or how unskilled we think we are, we can contribute too. And today, I learned that there is hope. These reflections illustrate the impact of this opportunity on our rangatahi to make connections and take action within our community. It speaks volumes about the importance of collaboration and listening when planning our city's future. We are the generation that will see through the implementation and results of the current council's actions, and therefore we have the right and responsibilities to be involved in the key decision-making and planning processes. Currently, my year group is going through the process of planning what our future will look like over the next few years, whether that's going on to tertiary study, working, traveling, learning a trade, or anywhere else we could find ourselves. But when talking to some of my friends, we are finding it hard to focus on planning our lives when the future of our planet is in question. Climate change has been a significant topic of conversation in our country and around the world, especially with the upcoming election. It is our time to be asking the hard but important questions. Who can we trust in government to look at policies and events with the perspective of environmental protection and sustainability? After all, through the power of key political leaders who can make and change policy, we can significantly influence our nation's approach to climate change from here on out. In February this year, Christopher Luxon visited my school, Autumn College, and as a head student, I had the opportunity to talk to him and voice the important questions and concerns of local youth. I asked him about what National would do to combat climate change if they were elected, and about their vision for sustainability in New Zealand. Like most politicians, he kind of answered my question, mentioning research and development as well as economic concepts. But as of recently, it is clear that with the current cost of living crisis, attention has been drawn away from the pressing climate issues and towards the seemingly more urgent cost of living. The reality is that we have to find a balance between the economy and the environment to move forward. Although it may be necessary for drastic change, the country will never sacrifice the economy for the better of the environment. Because as expected, how can people and businesses be prepared to invest money and time in climate initiatives when they are struggling to stay afloat themselves? This is a very fair perspective, and there is no straightforward answer or one ultimate solution to solve the climate crisis. But as youth, we want and need educated leaders who will stand up and catalyze positive change in the environment. We ask that leaders and decision makers have the environment at the forefront of their mind when planning how our future, both locally and nationally, will look. Tauranga Council has been working on increasing the opportunities they provide to youth in the environmental sector, such as the Youth Climate Forum, a part of the Tauranga Taurikura Environmental Strategy, which from a foundational level is helping build the future leaders we desperately need. There are also various community grants schools and environmental groups can apply for to fund their own sustainability initiatives. In my geography class at school, I have had urban planners visit, enlisting our opinions on their visions and proposals for more livable and connected neighbourhoods. Among other goals, these neighbourhood designs will reduce transport emissions, which are Tauranga's greatest emission group. The opportunity for youth to have their say on matters concerning the environment is becoming more available locally, which we will see have a positive impact in bringing up youth who are confident, informed, and eager to have their voices heard. Another recent initiative Tauranga Council has implemented is the FutureFit software, which was started as a collaboration between Auckland and Wellington City Councils. I've been involved as an ambassador for FutureFit to promote the software, recruit more users, and teach people how they can make a tangible difference. To briefly explain it, FutureFit is a carbon footprint calculator that asks you a variety of questions to estimate your annual carbon footprint. It then provides you with heaps of ways you can reduce your contribution to emissions in all aspects of life, such as transport, diet, and household tasks. You can set goals, log the actions you're taking, and receive reminders, while the software will track your progress so you can understand in numbers your impact on the environment. FutureFit is an innovation that both spreads awareness and provides a simple tool to help you make more sustainable decisions in your daily life. I encourage you to give it a go if you haven't already, as it helps you build simple but significant habits and will help New Zealand on our journey to becoming carbon zero. Education and experience around the environment and kaitiakitanga for children and teenagers is another important strategy we youth believe is essential in building generations who take responsibility for protecting the environment. We can teach children from a young age about the amazing biodiversity and local nature. We can inform them about climate change and the impacts it's having on our world. But most importantly, we can take an effective and proactive approach to help them understand the part they play and the value of kaitiakitanga. Imagine how we could strip away negative societal expectations and habits, such as always wanting more things and purchasing clothes from fast fashion, and swap these for sustainable secondhand shopping and teach the power of minimalism. Imagine if we took our youth on hikes and visited nature reserves instead of going to shopping centres. Imagine if we spent more time teaching children how to grow and care for their own produce and get their hands in the earth instead of sitting behind closed doors on screens. Teaching sustainable practices and environmental protection from a young age through hands-on experience is how we integrate kaitiakitanga into the values of upcoming generations, so that picking up rubbish is no longer a token action, but rubbish is not dropped in the first place. This is a future where consumers are informed and only buy from sustainable businesses, causing an entire shift in global markets because they can only sell what we demand. This is possible. Together, we must envision a future where sustainability is paramount and do everything in our power to ensure our visions become a reality. A future where generations upon generations can experience the natural beauty of our world and pass on the value of kaitiakitanga to their children to ensure our planet is left in good hands when it's our time to leave. As Mahatma Gandhi says, and one of my favorite quotes, be the change you wish to see in the world. I stand before you today not to tell you all the bad stuff you already know, but to let you know that we youth are willing to prioritize the environment, and we will lead by example and change mindsets on the climate crisis. Because there is still hope, and from hope we can ignite action. I encourage you to continue or even start your journey to reducing your carbon footprint and living more sustainably. Because no matter how young or old you are, no matter where you come from or who you identify as, we all share the same planet and therefore the same future. So what time is better than now to get to work making our shared vision a reality? That's it from me.
Kia ora, Karlia. That was pretty inspirational. I was thinking, wow, what was I doing when I was 17 years old? I'm not going to. I wasn't speaking in front of a wonderful crowd like this about the future for the environment. So well done, Karlia. You've been doing this for years, obviously. Yeah, that was really good. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a bit of a panel discussion session and open up for some questions. So I think we're going to spend a minute or two to make sure we get the sound right for that. And so this is one of those good opportunities. Push yourselves. Go after you have to, I said.
Should be all right. Do you want to test that? Do you want to test that?
Test one. Ooh. That sounds pretty good. That's very good. Yes, excellent. Awesome.
You want to put it down? Okay, bottom. Let's should mute it.
Yes.
Can you, as I've got to go, maybe the biggest climate change is
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Hey, kia ora whānau. Ooh, wee. We're going to make a start again in terms of a discussion. Now, there's just some logistics. In terms of this evening, I think on the program it said we're going to go through to 9. And just reading the room in terms of where we've got to, this is about 10 to 8 now. I'm thinking we might start wrapping up about between 8:30 and 8:40. Because the last thing I want is people like quietly like going, I'm just going out, and just quietly while we're still here. So we're going to sort of aim for about 8:30ish, and we'll close up and we'll let everyone go home about that time. Go on. So this is our panel discussion Q&A session. I've got some pre-baked questions, but I just can't help the temptation. We had a bit of a challenge there from Karlia when she had Christopher Luxon at the school and asked a politician. We've got a couple of politicians in the room, and I just can't help but just be tempted to maybe we might pass them the mic a little bit later on with the question from Karlia, what are you doing in terms of climate change? So we've got Mayor James Denny here, and we've got Kat McMillan at the back from the regional council. So I've given them the question. We're not putting them on the hot spot. They'll have a few minutes to have a think about it. Now, I've just got the one mic here because we just wanted to avoid some of the feedback we were doing a testing earlier. So when we get into the Q&A, I'm going to zip up into the crowd, get a question, and then I'm going to zip back with the mic, and then they're going to tag team on it. Now, if you've got a cold or a flu, don't put it on the mic and then want to share it with our crew. I'm just saying. Anyway, the first question is around, because we've been in the recent past, we're having binary conversations. Is there climate change? Yes, no. What are we going to do about it? Yes, we're going to do something. No, we're not going to be doing that. So this is a question that's moving on from those binary conversations and for our group here, and just thinking about people, we're in a world that's competing for people's time and focus. So people's bandwidths are quite narrow, and the time that they have to engage is getting smaller and smaller. And it's just for some of our panel members, how do you keep climate change at the center of people's consciousness? And I was reflecting on what Laura was saying when she was sitting at the dinner table with her parents, and they were having that conversation. Now, I'm not sure if people here have a 21st century table that has lots of stuff on it, and it's not necessarily a place where we have dinner and conversations anymore. So I'm just going to see if the panel members have got any thoughts about how do you keep climate change in the consciousness of people in their busy lives.
That's a hard one. I think everyone loves a good story. And in order for climate change and what we're going to do about things to really resonate with people and people to take advice on board or actions or ideas on board, if you can frame them up in a good story, people can resonate with it a bit more and then take it with them and share that story of how we can do things in better ways. So it's all about communication and connecting with people to keep things front of mind, I think.
I guess that what we do at Ngapeke Permaculture is to, we're always having conversations around the kai table. When we're working with people, we have many, many people that come to the block for various reasons. Some are very aware, some are not so aware, but we can only tell them about our experiences and say why we're doing what we're doing, because that hopefully will keep people aware. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a lot to add because basically those things, but keep it relevant for people. So when you are having those conversations, can they see it in their own life? How do you, kind of make a connection between them and actually what's happening, so it's not a theoretical concept, but it's real?
Well, in terms of like getting people's attention out about the issue, I guess you just have to bombard them with it. like everywhere where we would spend our times, especially like with this generation on social media, I always see lots of climate change stuff and like activism and events in my feed. And I think that like really resonates with my generation anyway, because that's how you find out about things and you can grow a network and build followers. And that spreads out the awareness as well, because people repost stuff on their stories and everyone else sees it. So I think that's a good way of grabbing attention of my generation.
Oh, that was an Olympic record for passing the baton. Fantastic. The second question is, who or what has been your inspiration to make a difference?
Are we always going to start with me? So this maybe isn't a message of hope, but I mean, growing up, I was very much so faced with the realities of kind of what's going to happen to people and planets if we don't act. I've gone through and gutted my family's batch and like picked up memorabilia that was completely destroyed. My friends have lost everything. So I do what I do so that fewer people will experience what I've experienced.
Who or what has been your inspiration to make a difference?
Okay, so before the buzzword was climate change, or the buzzwords, our culture is very much all about the environment. That's all I can say. All of our stories, all of our, all of our practices has everything to do with the environment. So that's my inspiration, is the culture.
Yeah, really similar for me as well. I think Māori culture is very connected to the environment, and so you grow up with that mindset. But I didn't think about it consciously and from a kind of industry or a business sense until I joined Tourism Bay of Plenty and someone mentioned, we're just going to think broader than the economy. And I was like, well, yeah, of course we should do that. And then it kind of sort of sparked something that I was like, why are we not doing that already? Of course we should be thinking about the environment and the people and what that means. And so kind of just rolled on from there, I guess.
For me, as like a year 7 student, I was in the science extension class and we started learning about issues to do with the climate, like ocean acidification. And when you're actually like visualizing something and you can see the impacts, I guess it really speaks to you. And that's kind of where I decided that that's where I want to go, and which is why I would be studying environmental science. And yeah, I had a really cool mentor, Ms. McPike, who wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't. And she was really passionate about it. And she shared so many of her stories with me from seeing firsthand impacts from all around the world. And that's what's really inspired me.
Awesome. I'm going to start with someone different the next time. I'm going to break from our little panel here. You can see me coming. Your Worship, James Denyer, Mayor of Western Bay of Plenty District Council. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say all the money or the bag, but that might not. Most of the people in the audience would go, what is he talking about? This is a new section of our evening, put the politicians on the spot.
So what was the question there?
What are you doing as the Mayor of Western Bay to respond to climate change?
Sure. Okay. Before I answer that, I'm going to take you back almost a year to the day actually today, and we were in this very room having our mayoral debate, and during the election campaign, and there was a question we all asked. It was one of those yes or no questions. Do you believe there's a climate crisis? And I think I was the only one that said yes, and it was kind of worrying. So look, I'm glad I won and can be here now to talk to you about what we're doing. So I think I'll split that into two halves. First, you've got the mitigation, and then you've got adaptation. Direct mitigation, I think our role is, while we do some small aspects like moving to electric vehicles and things like that, our role is more about showing leadership and showing it's the right thing to do. But a lot of the other stuff comes down to what you do yourself and central government. Adaptation, we're far more involved in. So that would be, at some point we're going to have to grapple with managed retreat. It means grappling with overloaded stormwater systems. It means encouraging people to have water tanks, perhaps in their property, to mitigate against drought. Actually, another mitigation thing that I did want to say is curbside collection and reducing waste to landfill, which obviously creates methane and also increases recycling. So there are things we are doing in that sector. But I think for our council, it's mainly in adaptation, and we're trying to. There's some big issues there, and we're trying to make our way in them. Thanks.
And just before I go up to Kat, I'm going to turn to Karlia and go, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess that's like your role in that stuff. And I think that's just important, like leading by example and being prepared to like put yourself out there and break away from a direction if you know that that's right. And that's how you inspire other people to do the same. Because when you're in those positions of power, you can have such a big influence. So being the role model and paving the way for sustainable living will really make a difference. Yeah.
I think that was a pass. Kat, she's just up the top. Now, the next question I'm going to ask the panelists after Kat, so I'm just going to give them a bit of time. It's Māori language this week, and we've got to Friday, and I'm just wondering if there's a Māori word that sort of like you think encapsulates, and you've had some of them in your presentations, but is there a particular word right at this particular moment that encapsulates what you're feeling about our response to climate change? Kat, what is the Bay of Plenty Regional Council doing to respond to climate change?
Kia ora, thank you. Well, there's loads of regional council staff in here, so that's really positive to see, because there's lots of passionate people about climate change in our whole organisation. We're an environmental organisation, so what we do, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, what we do is stuff to do with enhancing the environment. But as a politician, I'm a bit of a climate and environment warrior, probably old school. I think I'm one of the few councillors around the Motu that's actually vegan. But the way I look at it is you only have so many credits in the bank account, because when you sit around the council table, there's standing orders, which is kind of the rules of play, and everything goes through the chair. So you can't just have wait, I've got another thing to say, and another thing, wait, I just wanted to say this. You kind of have your moment to speak, and then everyone else gets a chance to speak, and then you're waiting to speak again. So that's the credit in the bank account thing. So I always think about the sweet spot is where you can tick more than one box with one action. So with climate change, we've got biodiversity collapse, climate crisis. We've also got a freshwater crisis, and all three things are completely interrelated. So I try to throw the dart into the middle of the three of those Venn diagram. Therefore, because you've only got so much budget, right? So if you can, and it was talked about, Laura, earlier about daylighting waterways, nature-based solutions. So that's a drum I bang very heavily around the council table. If we can use nature-based solutions instead of man-made structures, of course, we still have to have some man-made structures like stop banks. But if we can use nature-based solutions upriver, and that's things like retiring marginal steep land, planting it with natives, fencing off waterways, being able to have sustainable land use and land use practices, all of these things are reducing emissions as well as enhancing biodiversity. So is that ringing for everyone or just me? Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I suppose in a nutshell, it's about ticking as many boxes as you possibly can as a politician so that you can hopefully get it across the line. And then it's in the strategy. So just driving from that perspective so that you can influence, because you can't win everything, right? So it's getting the influence with the budget you've got to do the things that you can that are going to have the most impact for environment and climate action. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there with that.
Awesome. That was great. There was our two politicians, and James was judge. So we're going to go to Laura. What did you reckon of that performance?
Oh, I liked it. Hit a bunch of the buzzwords.
Very good. It sounds like a pass. The two politicians, well done. Now we're just going to come back to our question I asked earlier. It's Māori Language Week. It's not a compulsory question. If you like answer this, is there a particular Māori word that you thought encapsulates what you're feeling right now?
One of the words that I've been taught recently is utu, which I think is reciprocity. And a lot of the work, or a lot of the messaging about we have to give back anything we take, we've got to return, we've got to leave things better than we've left it. And maybe there are negative impacts of some adaptation actions, but what can we do to restore and give back in order to offset that? So, utu.
I can think of two words. It's a phrase, and it's we call it pā whakawairua. So pā being a place, and in this case, in the environment, and whakawairua meaning that we're bringing back you're active in trying to bring back the spirit of that place and the mauri of that place. So going from one place to another, saying that this point here is the lowest point you can go, but this is the highest point you can go. So, and it's that journey, pā whakawairua.
Kia ora. I'm going to tautoko Karlia here and say rangatahi. I think she's an excellent example of inspired leaders who are going to come or who are already here, I think, but also that we must look to our generations that come after us and think about leaving the planet healthy for them.
I probably have a couple of words. Well, I already talked about kaitiakitanga in my presentation, which I think is really important, but also like manaaki whenua and manaaki tangata, because by caring for our land, we're also caring for our people.
Thank you. We've just got our Māori language ambassadors for the week. Now this is the crowd participation section, so I'm going to wander around. If you can put your hand up and you can ask questions of our panelists. I'll even take eyebrow shifts if you don't want to use your hands. Yeah, here we go. Gentleman in the red shirt. Here we go.
I want to ask an elephant in the room question, because one of our speakers talked about an elephant in the room with regard to tourism. In that I'm guessing, because I've never been in that room, that the argument is that if you stopped all the planes flying into New Zealand with tourists, then it would be better for the planet. But the other part of, and I presume that's part of the discussion, but the other part of it, I think, goes even wider than that. And that is the public's confidence in not just the politicians, but in the scientists. And the example I'd give is that I think in the last 2 years post-COVID, there's been a huge shift in confidence in the experts. It used to be said, you trust the science, you trust the scientists. But what's happened, and I'm one of those, I trusted the scientists. I also trusted the politicians. But now I realise, certainly with regard to COVID, that a lot of what I was told, you expect mistakes when things go wrong, but a lot of what we were told was actually lies. Now, why moving that on, I wonder if this whole debate is going to suffer from the whole issue, because there are always people who are arguing against it. We heard from the mayor, the others didn't believe there was climate change, the other candidates. And I'm wondering if any of the panel have got any suggestions or solutions for how you deal with the skeptics who are really saying, we were lied to about that. Why should we believe you, the experts, about this?
Very good question. And we're in a period of low levels of trust in government agencies, decision makers, people who are brought out in front of the public to say this is true and this is not true. So good question. Let's start down Karlia's end.
Well, I guess in your question, you're talking about like distrust in politicians and scientists. So I guess you have to take it away from them and I guess go into the community with people like Ngapeke Permaculture who are working in the environment and they've seen the impacts of it and taking it into the community and getting them to push out the message, because we have more trust in a group than like one person standing up there and telling us what's right and what's not.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that those of us who do believe and can speak to it, do speak to it, and we don't be quiet, no matter how many skeptics are out there, and we just continue to push the message because we have to get it out there. There's no other option, right? And I think just to repeat what I said earlier about relevancy, make people believe it in a way that they can take it in for them, and that might be different for everyone, right? And it might be do the right thing for this reason, or it might be, hey, here's an economic motivation to do that, or this is going to work for you, and just start people on that journey and then keep going from there.
Good question, John. Yeah, you know, I'm a bit like that too. I don't necessarily believe politicians or scientists, but actually being in the environment yourself and doing something actively yourself and making observations of your, immediate environment and so on, you take note of some things that you have to wonder what's happening, and that's what's happened with me. So our environment has changed so drastically, and my people are suffering as a result of it. Then I have to do something about that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
I think we've gotten to the point, and 20 years ago, we probably had gotten to the point where everyone agrees or can agree that there are problems now. Auckland's floods, Cyclone Gabrielle's floods, Hurricane Katrina, the amount of waste that's produced, the amount of consumption that's encouraged. These are all things, irrespective of climate change, that I think people would agree are things that we don't want to live with. And so we can make changes to work towards solutions to those problems, irrespective of the trajectory that we're headed, in order to create a safer, better, more environmentally sensitive world. And if things don't change, we're left with a safer, better, more environmentally sensitive world. And that's a win. So take action anyway.
Thank you. That was a very thoughtful question and thoughtful answers. Who would like to be next? If no one puts their hands up, I'm going to do like a compulsory question with people. I'm going to go, would you like to ask a question?
Kia ora. Thank you all. And I just want to say thanks so much for the positive message. It's so nice to hear positive communication on what is happening and how we can move forward. Often this space can be super intense and a lot of overwhelming information. So I guess my question is, what is it you do for yourselves for your own well-being while working in this industry constantly? And how do you make sure you don't get stuck down in some of the overwhelming information and you bring yourselves back up to be here with us today?
I bought a camper just recently. I want to be in the environment there all the time anyway. So I love what I do. But you're right, when you are a champion or a hero, as we've been called tonight, there is an expectation from the people that are watching. And so that gets a little bit tiring. So I think I'll go off and do some camping and enjoy other places.
Yeah, I mean, if all of us in this room are not well, we can't, give to the other causes, right? So it's a really good question. I take inspiration from the people I get to engage with who are doing awesome things and kind of celebrate those things, and that's pretty cool. But also, yeah, love getting out and into the environment and going to the beach and kind of just kind of appreciating this amazing place that we live in, heading into the bush and kind of the concept of forest bathing, I suppose, and taking that moment.
Well, personally, I guess I haven't really been involved in it that much as I'm young. So it's kind of still like, I guess you could call it the honeymoon phase with the environment. But I think there's still so many people with so much hope. And like Laura said, at the end of the day, we're doing something to make a difference. And I start actually studying science behind it, but yes, you just gotta look at the end of the tunnel. It's turned itself off, yeah.
It's recycling.
Oh, that's working.
We're going to get a magic oil. I was going to go with my magic hand. Here we go. Now, we haven't had any questions over this way. Oh, sorry.
Thought I got a free pass. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I have to engage quite a lot with a bit of trauma because like I meet with communities and I talk about managed retreat and I talk about how your house isn't going to be there, which is heavy. And I do a lot of yoga. I love float, which is great. I have taken up surfing and I'm horrifically bad at it, to the point where I'll go out there for 35, 45 minutes. And if I get up once, it's a good day. But just getting out there and getting beat up is really good for the soul.
Awesome. I haven't forgotten you over here. We need a question from this side of the room. Otherwise, I'm going to randomly pick somebody. You've been warned. You're trying to avoid eye contact with me. I could see it. Have you got a question for our panelists?
Thank them for their lovely knowledge and sharing with us.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm coming over to the other side now. There was a question I asked earlier about who was an inspiration, and I just wanted to share with you just a little 10-second story. I did a conservation course when I was a young fella up in Auckland, and we went out into the Hauriki Gulf and we were working on the islands doing track maintenance, building boardwalks. We got to spend a lot of time doing bird counts on Little Barrier and wonderful places where the public don't get a lot of access to. And we had Professor John Morton, who's a zoologist, came to talk to us. And it was the most inspirational conversation that he had with us as sort of young people working out in the environment. And one of the things he emphasized was that each one of us personally had a right, but also a responsibility to make a difference. And you want to have one of those light bulb moments and you realize, actually, he's just given us permission to go out and do what we think's the right thing to do. So I think lots of us have those little light bulb moments. And that was the one for me. That was in 1993. And I think from memory, he actually passed away later that year. So he had one leg in the grave, as you say. He had this wonderful, illustrious career, and he took the time out to come and talk to young people to inspire new generations. So just wanted to acknowledge Professor John Morton before we pop over this way. And I saw a nod. There was a trick. I saw you nod. So you've got a question for our panel?
Something up. So what do you think would be the one biggest, most significant shift we could make in the Bay of Plenty to make ourselves more resilient to climate change?
Good question.
About to throw a grenade. Better land use planning. We have built in some really vulnerable, high risk areas. So we know that now. How about we stop doing that? And see what we can do about the problems that we've already got.
Yes, I agree with you. I think, councils can really make some good policy changes and, stop building on our wetlands. The wetlands are too important. They've got a very, very important job to do. I'm from the Papamoa area, and all of that used to be wetland, and now it's just residential, and no wonder we're having some problems with excess water.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you've both said. That's absolutely necessary. Probably can't leave this room though without mentioning transport and roading, right? Definitely need to do something about creating some low carbon travel options and getting cars and trucks off the road.
Well, I'll agree with the expert. But yeah, transport emissions are one of the greatest emission groups in Tauranga, and it's how we address that, I guess, with the traffic and stuff. But it's quite hard to move people away from the convenience of car travel, I guess, even though it's hard to park in town, but cars still seem to be the option. So the question is, how do we actually and sustainably move people off cars and onto bikes safely, potentially like smaller buses that actually fill people? Yeah.
We've got a question down the front and then one up there. This is a question.
What? Yes.
It's going to be a question.
My question is, what do we want of our politicians? There's a lot of criticisms of politicians, but we live in a democracy in which politicians are supposed to do what the people want. And there's a lot of people that don't want to respond to climate change. We refer to our politicians as our leaders, but we want to follow them to follow us. We want them to do what the majority of people want, and the climate change requires a lot of inconvenient changes. And people don't want that. What do we want of our politicians?
Awesome. Awesome. What do we want of our politicians?
Well, thank you for that. I think climate change will require lots of really inconvenient changes, but it's going to get a whole hell of a lot more inconvenient if we don't start trying to fix the problem. But climate change action needs to happen locally, and a lot of what we hear from local and regional governments is a little bit of hands tied because of lack of direction from national government, central level government. And so we need really clear direction from central government so that local and regional government can get to work. There also needs to be funding available. And I think there needs to be some level of separation and protection from climate, or between climate action and politics. Right now I'm writing a guidance for Ministry for the Environment, for climate change adaptation for government. And we don't know if it'll ever get published, because as the government changes, what happens to things like that that are in progress. So I think we need some sort of separation.
That's a really loaded question for someone like me who's tangata whenua. I think that our future politicians have to be very conscious of the environment. And I don't have much faith in current politicians, but I have a lot of hope for the young ones coming through. And my message to young ones always is that you have to lead the way, and you have to take the places of, sit in those places and create the world that they want. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess listen to what the people are telling you. I think Laura hit the nail on the head, frankly. But also, we as a community, we need to get out there and vote for the people who we think are going to do the right thing. And so many of us don't vote. So maybe it's about what we can do. And what we can do is go and tell the people that we know, hey, do the right thing and go and actually vote for someone that you want to lead us.
Yeah, I completely agree with Laura about the separation, because there's already so much unknowing already, but adding the politics factor and the parties into it does add to it as well. And I also think that for the politicians to listen to us, we need to tell them. So hopefully with my generation, when we're starting to bring up like environmental knowledge and education from a younger age, we need the young people voting, because often that's the demographic that's getting the environmental message across. So it's getting everyone to vote, because hopefully that spreads the word more.
That was great. Thank you. I think we're going to have one last question up here, and then we'll wrap up. I'm going to shimmy.
So I love to read and I love books, and I'm curious, who are you reading, or do you have a book that you'd like to recommend to us?
I'm trying to think of the book, but I don't know the name. Mom, do you know it's about like the neurosurgeon? I don't know. No, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll search it up and get back to you.
Yeah, I'm also I do love to read, but I can't think of anything right now that I can recommend to you. Sorry. Yeah, drawing an absolute blank on that one.
When I was in my 20s, I think I read Nelson Mandela's book, or about his biography. I think it was about him anyway. And because I really do believe that, you know, you really can change the world when you decide on what it is you want and you act on that. You know, Nelson Mandela was the perfect example of how something can change.
Maybe not a book that you'd normally read. There is a chef in South Louisiana named Melissa Martin, and she has a cookbook called Mosquito Supper Club. And the subtitle is Lessons from a Dying Bayou or Lessons from a Dying Coast. And she grew up where I grew up, down the bayou. She grew up in Cocodrie. But a lot of Cajun culture is really similar, I think, to Maori culture, where you live off the land, you bury your placenta on your land, you really value the food that you eat, and the food that you eat tells a story and is really part of your identity. And so her recipes are wonderfully delicious, but also the cookbook has these really powerful stories about how our land is changing over time, and how our culture is changing over time, and how we're risking losing Mahingakai as climate changes and as our environments change, and how that might affect our way of life and our culture and all of that. Don't know if you can get it in New Zealand, but Mosquito Supper Club, it's amazing. 10 out of 10 would recommend to read it and have a cry.
Sounds like a good couple of recommendations there. This morning, I just started reading a term. It's called the Draft Transitional National Planning Framework. It's just recently been published. It's 570 pages long. I skipped right to the last pages just to see what the ending was. And so I was like, oh, bugger. So I already know what the end is, and so I've started from the beginning again. I wouldn't recommend it. All good.
It's called Into the Magic Shop. It's quite a popular book, but even though it's about a person's journey to becoming a neurosurgeon, the relationship between like the brain, which I guess is like education, and the heart, I guess, which guides you, I think is really applicable to climate change and the environment, because we need education, but we also need, I guess, the desire to do better, which comes from the heart.
Yes, and I've just been listening to a book called Eat, and it is a really scary book, and it's just come out recently, and I recommend definitely the politicians reading. And I think the rest of the book is called Eat, H-E-A-T. I'm sorry, I can't remember the author, but it's a modern book and it's really worth listening.
I think everyone got that. Heat, including for the politicians. Good reading. Wonderful. Hey, that's just drawing our evening to a close. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you all for coming out on a Friday night and being really good sports, and supporting our presenters this evening and asking some really thoughtful questions for them. I'd also like to thank our wonderful guest speakers this evening. It should be completely noticed by everyone that we've got 4 wahine toa here, 4 ladies who have come along talking about their passion and their commitment to the environment, but also for this evening, looking through a climate change lens. So I'd just like to ask you all to give them a rousing applause. It's usually the job of a presenter to do a summary of the presentations, but you heard the presentations, you saw it in person, so I'm not going to summarize what they said. You heard what they said, but also just to pick up a couple of points, action in your community, being local, doing those things that you're passionate about, and being your authentic selves translates to all other humans. I'm going to borrow or even potentially steal some of my favorite quotes from a well-known person called David Attenborough. So this isn't a quote that he made all at once. This is the collection of my favorites. So I'm giving him the kudos for this. Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on the finite planet is either mad or an economist. That's one of my favorites. You can wreck one rainforest, then move, drain one wetland of its resources, and move on to another, but climate change is global. The young people, they care. They know that this is the world that they are going to grow up in, that they are going to spend the rest of their lives in. But I think it's more idealistic than that. They actually believe that humanity, the human species, has no right to destroy and despoil it regardless. They actually feel that very powerfully. The final chapter is ours to write. We know what we need to do. What happens next is up to us. Hoi anō he mihi kawana ki o koutou, ko taitina na mai ki tēnei pō, e mihi kawana ki ngā wahine toa, e tu atu nei I runga I tātā mira, I mua tātā tau hāpori, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. E maharana au ki te whakatau ki a rātou mā, toi tū te marae o tāne, toi tū te marae o Tangaroa, toi tū te iwi. Through the sustenance of our land and our sea, the people will prosper. Good evening.